507 Avenida Primavera, Marathon, Florida 33050. Bill's phone number is area code 305-743-5622. The recording was made on January 16th, 1989 by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center at Bill's home. This is tape number 1 of 2 tapes. Okay, Bill. Yeah, working fine. If you would just give us your name and your address and your phone number, please.
This is Bill Rasmusson. Telephone number 743-5622, Marathon, Florida.
Okay, what's your street address?
507 Primavera, Principal Street.
Principal Street, that stands for.
Yeah,
All right.
Avenida Primavera.
Okay, very good. Now, maybe if you would, Bill, take us back to when you started at Oldsmobile. What date did you start?
I was hired by Charlie Bruner on 5/1/42.
Okay. That was during the war, right? The war was on.
Yes, it was an early part of the war.
All right. Okay.
I had worked at Board of Water and Electric Light, and I couldn't see staying there, so I applied to Oldsmobile and was taken in immediately. In fact, as I interviewed on Thursday and went to work on Friday.
It was that quick. That's interesting. Was there a shortage of engineers at that time in the plant?
Yes, and in fact, at that time I had a child and married, and I was A1 still, but they said, well, forget about it. We'll try to keep you exempt or whatever. So I never heard anything more about.
So it did work.
Yeah, right.
Okay. See, who was the plant engineer when you hired in, Bill?
That was the plant engineer who was on sick leave was Harry Beeman.
Harry Beeman. Okay. Do you remember anything about either Charlie Bruner or Harry Beeman, like what type of individuals those folks were?
Oh, very different.
Oh, were they? Okay.
Charlie was very, very conservative and mild spoken and
all right.
Tried to be a gentleman in every way.
Yeah.
Harry was a rough individual. He'd come up through the shop. In fact, as he was head of the machine repair.
All right.
In 40 there.
Kind of the school of hard knocks.
He was the bull of the woods.
The old bull of the woods. Okay. All right. And so you mentioned he was sick at the time?
Yeah, he was on sick leave.
All right.
He never did work, well, I'd say probably not more than a month during the time that that he was back and so forth, and then he passed on. And Joe Newman was his assistant, acting plant engineer when I went in there.
All right.
Then he became plant engineer.
Okay.
And then he was there for a while, and he moved out, went to Kansas City.
Oh, all right. Yeah. How was Joe Newman different from Charlie Bruner?
Oh, Joe was a student, and he believed in having things well organized. He ran a clean department. He was a very clean individual, and enjoyable to work for.
Okay. Do you remember maybe what your first task or two was at the plant?
Probably started at the bottom.
Good place.
I was to design bathroom facilities for women and men in Building 75, too, which was then going to be a shell plant.
Oh, okay. All right.
And when I got that done, I was to lay out a cafeteria in that area also, which all of that was done.
Now, were those the ones that were sort of out in the middle up over the...
Well, at that time, they were clear down to the west end of Building 75.
Oh, all right.
Clear to the far end.
All right, so it isn't the ones that I remember that were there.
No, that was in
days.
32, I think you're thinking of.
Okay, all right.
Because it was moved, a pretty decent one put in 32, where the southern was just knock up some boards and so they could serve soup and a few things like that.
Quick and dirty.
Right, mostly dirty.
Okay. Then Bill, during the war, we were making a lot of war materials. What did you have to work on?
Most of my time was spent keeping the test range going and building 20 and 37. I mean, for the 20 and 37 millimeter guns, which were tested there. So
this is the underground test facility?
Right. That was a facility that was just north of building 38.
Okay. What did they do down in there?
Well, it was a disaster to start with. It was designed by Argonaut. They'd never built one before.
Okay.
And they made two nice noise chambers at both ends with a tunnel to carry the noise through. And it was horrible.
I'll bet it was loud.
It was loud, terrible. And they had no disposal for the spent ammunition. So, as I say, I spent a big share of my time trying to keep that place going while they were making these guns.
What did they shoot into at the far end?
Well, they had it set up originally that they shoot into drums. Well, they'd shoot about one round, one cycle, which I think was probably around 20 rounds or so.
Okay.
And then they'd have to change the barrel.
Yeah. The barrel is the thing that held the bullets?
Yeah, it was probably about, was what you shot into.
Oh, what you shot into.
Right. All right. Probably was 3 feet in diameter and 5 feet long, something like that. And what would happen is that it would shoot into it, then the shells would go up, and then they just go all
ricochet around inside there.
So the way I solved that was fairly simple. I called the scrapyard and asked them if they had any bale steel. So they said yes. And I said, well, I'd like to buy a few tons of it. So what we did, we cleaned out that place back there and just piled bales of scrap steel.
The big old square bales.
Bales in the opening where the shells come in, and filled it behind with gravel.
Oh, okay.
And it worked.
What, the shells just sort of kind of got stuck in the in the bales?
Yeah, they had quite a lot of gravel to go through, and the bales kept the gravel from coming back out. And it had to take maintenance, but it worked for the rest of the time.
What was the shooting chamber like, or where the gun was?
Well, they had a mount for each of the tubes, and
they just shoot through a hole in the wall?
Well, no, it was a tile, about a 3-foot tile.
Oh, okay.
That went underground.
That was where you shot into, was this long,
you went through the tile and then into the pit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How big was the pit? Do you remember about?
Oh, I would say there probably was 15, 20 feet deep. And, I mean, deep, wide. Wide.
Yeah.
And then the width of the building was probably 60 feet or something like that. It was all underground.
All underground.
And then there was a place in the center where it's supposed to collect the gas, but it didn't work out very well. I had one of my early accidents there, which I never got reprimanded on it, but I guess it's because it was so odd. The gas was causing a lot of trouble. It would blow up every once in a while. So I thought, well, why don't I put a fan in there and draw it out? Well, it worked beautiful for a few weeks or what have you. And apparently the proper mixture come up, run out of there. There must have been friction in the fan or something. And the fan ended up all over the area.
Oh, it exploded?
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
So I got a little razzing on that.
The Rasmusson bomb.
Right.
Uh, did they fire every gun, Bill? Or
Yeah, every one of them was test fired.
everyone was test fired.
Right.
And how many gun stations did they have? Do you remember?
I think there was 8.
8 of them.
Yeah.
Did they fire all the time at every one, or how did they do that?
I would think that they were firing probably 2 or 3 at a time.
Uh-huh. And there must have been some workers down there.
Yeah, there was a man that was testing. In fact, as they were all from the engineering in Building 64.
Oh, were they? Uh-huh.
The mechanics and so forth that were transferred over there. Oh, what was his name now? It was head of that. Vern Yates or
Oh, Bill Yates?
no,
not Bill Yates.
Vern Yallop.
Oh, okay, Vern Yallop.
Yeah, Vern Yallop was head of engineering shops.
All right.
And when that folded up at the end of car production, he was put in charge of that.
Oh, okay.
So he brought most of his people from there over there. So they were the test people.
Did the guys have to wear any ear protection? Or
yes, they did.
They did.
It was unbearable.
Yeah.
Even at that.
Was it?
Yeah. It was way beyond what they were allowed today.
Yeah.
But OSHA would approve.
Now, did you test both 20 and 37 millimeters?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
also, I spent quite a bit of my time in between filling in there in the shell plant at the forge plant.
All right.
They were making 75s at that time.
This was all forging, though, or machining?
Well, they forged them, and then the part I got into was installing the machinery and putting in conveyor systems and such as that for the finishing of the shell was forged, and there it was machined.
It was machined there also?
Right. And ready to be sent to another place for assembly into a shell.
Okay. Do you remember where the machining was done?
That was in the old part of the forge plant.
201, 2 area, that
right,
area?
Right,
okay.
Yeah.
Did 206 and 7 up at the north side exist at that point in time?
No, well, yes, that's where the hammers were.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was a hammer job making shells?
No, as I recall, it was yes, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm a little vague on that.
Yeah, that's all right. But the machining was all done kind of down there on the south side in the old buildings.
Right. And the forging work was done on the other.
Up in the other half.
I believe that they had a die that set in a press, in a forging press.
Okay.
And then it come down, I know that's the way it was, come down and form the shell.
All right.
To somewhat near size.
Yes.
And then from there it went to machining.
Okay, so
that's the way it went.
It was a press for forging rather than a hammer.
Yeah, they were hot.
In
fact, they had a circular furnace. And it was going around there. And cold one part, when they took them out, forging is hot.
Okay. And you were working on an installation of the machinery for the...
Yes, and general engineering help, that they needed, development and so forth. At that point, they was a little weak in engineering over there.
Who was there? Do you remember?
I believe it was John Dakin.
John Dakin was over there?
Yeah, I think John Dakin was plant engineer
okay.
At that time.
All right.
And John was moved over to the other plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's see. You mentioned that a guy by the name of Aiken was your supervisor?
Yeah. Azel Aiken.
Azel Aiken.
Yeah.
Okay. What, did he reside in 40?
Yes, he was in 40.
All
he
right.
was an engineer by profession or by training, and never followed his engineering too much. He went into the shop and worked. And then he would be brought up to the engineering and model change and so forth. Then when the war developed, this is before I was there, though.
Yes.
He then become head of the plant engineering part of it. They needed more designers than they had previously.
All right. Oh, what kind of an individual was he?
Oh, he was a very nice gentleman. Little too easygoing.
Was he?
To get out some of the work he had to do.
Okay.
But he was liked by everybody, and he done the best he could do.
Yeah. Okay. You know, after the war, I mean, I assume we went through the plant and cleared everything out and must have had to work day and night to get back to car production.
Well, it was not that simple.
Okay.
Some of the areas remained after the war for a while.
Still making government materials?
Yeah, Building 37. That was a shell plant. That was a heavier shell. I think that was a 75, and I think they even went up to 105s, as I recall.
But there was shells, not cannons.
No, these were cannons.
These were cannons. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
They made the barrels and and so forth.
All right.
Remember, I don't know if you remember, it was still there when you were, where they had the vertical plating.
I remember that tank.
Yeah. Well, was a part of that, where the shells were, or the cannons were machined, and then they were plated.
In that big hole in the ground.
Right. They had plating tanks in there. Right.
What, do you remember what else they made, Bill, and where it was made? Like 56 was used for something?
Well, 56 was, they come out with a HE shell that they run there for a while.
All right.
And then they made rockets, but the rockets were made in a part of 28 that was cleaned out.
Okay.
How
about engine parts? Did we make?
No, everything was
shut down.
Shut down.
Okay.
And some of it was right where they quit. Where they quit auto production.
They just left it there.
Move machinery around to make room, like for the rocket and so forth.
Okay. And you mentioned out in 32 or 75, we were making shells out there.
Yes.
75 millimeter shells.
Mostly 75s, although they did make 150s there too.
Okay.
32 made the 150s, and 75 made the other.
All right.
But they didn't run 150s very long.
All right.
That was very near the end of the war.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Well, then, now go back to after the war and what happened then?
Actually, there was about 2 phases for me as far as the after the war was concerned. Just trying to orient this properly. Okay, as I recall, my assignment just before, here I'm getting it together now, correct timing. Just before the end of the war, I was called into John Dakin's office. He was then plant engineer at the main plant.
All right.
And John Dykstra was in there with him.
Who was John Dykstra?
John Dykstra was production manager at that time. Remember, John went from Oldsmobile to Ford, and then to he became chairman of the board at Ford. He was the big, So anyway, John Dykstra said that there had been 2 places picked. They had a shortage of foundry capacity. And there's 2 places that had been picked to set up foundries. And it was my job. Also at the same meeting, there was a man from the Central Foundry who was a designer. And he said that I was to be transferred to Building 64, product engineering. Not on their payroll, it'd be the same as I was, but in that building because of the secrecy of the job. So I went over there and made some field trips and so forth, and we developed the basic layout for a foundry.
All right.
In fact, as we got so far that we bought the property, which is that property between Saginaw, and well, anyways, where the plant 3 is.
Willow.
Yeah,
Between
Willow.
Saginaw and
Yeah.
Willow.
Yeah, we bought that plot of land in there for
All
the
right.
foundry.
So that's what that was originally bought for, was a
Right.
foundry.
Right.
Interesting.
And then
that would have been, had the war ended then, or not quite?
It was right at the end.
All right.
Just, well, I think probably it had ended or just was
Okay.
ending. It was
like
awful
45 or so, somewhere in there.
right near the end.
All right. Okay.
And then I was then they decided that they would put the plant some other place, foundry.
All right. So it never
So
materialized.
it never was put in there.
Uh-huh.
So at that point, I went back to building 40 plant engineering.
Why did it not happen, I wonder?
I don't know.
No indications of what? Okay.
I have an idea. It was that big, remember that big foundry that was down in Ohio?
Yeah, Defiant.
Yeah. I think that's the Defiance one would have been the Oldsmobile, but
had it been here.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I don't know what I never was in that. That was a high management station.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay.
Well, after that, back in 40, I spent the next few years entirely in the motor plant. First in the restoration of the straight six.
All right.
Reshuffling the machinery in there to get back in production.
Had that been mostly kept? We kept all that machinery?
The machinery was mostly stored was still in there, and some of it had been moved over to the plating plant, 77.
78 or
77, yeah, or 78. Right.
Okay.
So it was brought back in there and put into operation. So as I recall, the 6 was the first engine they built after the war.
All right.
But the 8 was right near it. It says the 8 was the far end and the 6 was more to the north end.
Oh,
28.
Building 28.
And 33 and so forth.
Okay.
The cranks had made out in 33.
All the cranks, that straight 8 and the 6 were both together in that area?
Right.
In 33? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you remember where the block lines were?
I think the block line was, I remember now, the block line was just about in the center of the building 28.
Oh, okay.
Just about in the center there. And remember Al Niles?
The name, yeah.
Yeah, he was a foreman, probably the oldest foreman at that time. He retired shortly thereafter.
And where was engine assembly at that time?
That was in that same area, as I recall it.
It was in 28.
Yeah.
Like maybe along the east wall there, up next to the wall, perhaps? Does that ring a bell?
Well, or in 33, what used to be that train dock area.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Okay. And then when that was finished, the Kettering engine come along, or the V8 engine.
Right.
And
that happened in like 48.
I was field engineer for that and did some designing, and I spent all of my time there.
All right.
And grew up with it.
So now all of that machinery, Bill, ended up where? Where did we put that? Well,
ultimately, when the 8 got underway, the 6, they just kept a few machines over in 77, I believe it was.
Okay.
To make the life run on some of the parts for the
service kinds of things.
Service type of thing.
Where did the V8 initially, like where was the block line and those kinds of things?
Well, your block line started in 38.
Okay.
With your first operations. That was your machining of your reference points.
Yes.
Then it went down through the transfer machines in 38.
And it's zigzagging back
and forth.
Uh-huh.
And then it ended up at the end of, just about took in all of that in the far end of the building there.
Okay.
Then there's a conveyor that delivered the block from there over to the east side of 30, the east side of 36, where the assembly line was installed.
Okay. So the block line sort of took up a lot of building 38.
Yeah, and then the 36, the north end of it was a head department.
Okay.
And then just beyond that was the rod department.
Beyond, you mean south, coming south?
Yeah, just south of there was the rod department.
And where were cranks machined for that engine?
They were in 33.
They were over in 33. And pistons?
Pistons were in 33 also.
Okay. Manifolds, do you remember where those were? Those kinds of, they're maybe a little too small to remember.
I believe the manifold was made in 28.
Okay. And
I'm not sure of that, but I think it was 28.
And where was engine test?
Engine test was at the north end of 36.
All right.
Just right outside the offices. Okay. There.
Yeah, the offices were up on the north wall there.
Right, right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a good description of the plant. Do you remember how fast the assembly line went? Any discussions on that?
No, I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
Okay. How about?
I'd have to make a guess, which I shouldn't do.
No, that's all right. How about, can you remember some of what I would call the problems of the day as you were installing all of those things? What kinds of things went on that were kind of typical in a job like that?
Well, there was a lot of problems. Getting the machinery at that time. When the V8 came in there, Barlow was acting plant engineer too.
Dakin had.
Well, there was they worked together at one point, and then there was Ernsberger, who was assistant. He was head of the electrical department previous to that.
All right. So you sort of had three people there that were.
Yeah.
The head.
Kind of a carryover and so forth, as I recall it.
And see, you knew all of those individuals.
Yes, right.
Tell me about those three people, the Dakins and the.
Well, John was a terrific individual, John Dakin.
Okay.
He had a saying for everything. One of his favorite was God's green apples.
Okay. How would he just use those in his normal conversation?
He could talk in sayings almost.
Is that right? Okay.
Then there was Ernsberger.
Okay.
Who come from electrical. He was assistant plant engineer. He didn't have a book in his office. Had a clear tabletop at all times.
All right. Did he do anything?
Not too much.
Okay. And who was the third one we were?
Well, then John Dakin.
Oh, Dakin.
John Dakin come in there.
Yeah, all right.
I think Barlow had a heart attack.
All right.
Because remember, he was head of the salvage department for a while.
All right.
For a few years.
All right.
And then John come over from there.
All right. And Barlow, did you know him?
Oh yes, I knew Barlow real well.
What about Bob? What sort of an individual was Bob?
Bob come from the Fisher plant. He was plant engineer of the local Fisher plant.
Okay. And he had come over during the war?
Right, right.
What, and was he I'm going to call him old schooler or
Barlow was a gentleman. He was a mixture of the bull of the woods and the newer of treating his people very, very good.
Okay.
So he was a good plant engineer. I liked him real well.
Bill, in those days, how did people communicate needs between various groups and individuals? Did you have meetings, or how did you do the things that you had to do when you had to communicate things?
Well, they had the operating meeting once a week.
Okay, they were doing that in those days?
Yeah, in those days.
All right. And then how would that kind of information get down to you as an engineer that were doing things?
Well, as it was communicated from the plant engineer or through his next in line.
Okay, you wouldn't sit in meetings with the plant engineer and have those kinds of things happen?
Very seldom would that occur.
Very seldom. Okay. Now, you mentioned John Dakin was killed?
Yes. Yeah, I think Let me just look for it. Let me see. Hold on. Yeah.
Maybe I jumped over something here. See, Bill, before that happened, apparently you mentioned that you worked for Stu Rudder.
Yeah, I did work. Stu was head of the plant engineering design group.
Okay, how long had he been there for? Quite a while by the time you had got there?
Stu was hired early in the war.
All right.
He was there when I come, but he hadn't been there very long.
All right. But he was at the time when you were there later. He was your boss, huh?
Yes, that's right.
All right. And then at some point in time, this must have been shortly thereafter, you were. See, Bill, at some point in time in there, you were made a superintendent of maintenance?
Right. I just want to get ahead of that a little bit.
Okay.
Well, anyway, you want to use this guy?
Bill,
Right.
you want to use this?
No, I got it right here. After the, I was, you might say, cleaning up on the V8 motor plant job, starting to get in production didn't require as much
Okay.
engineering. I had scheduled my vacation so I could be home and help the wife when our son was born. This was, I can remember it because his day,
His
birthday is February the 14th in 44.
Oh, okay.
I was had taken that week off and only been off about a day or so, and I was called to come back in to go to work. And I asked him what the problem was, and he said, "Well, Eddie Searle had quit." And
Eddie Searle had been
he had been in charge of the engineering for the new assembly plant,
okay.
which was out in building 75 and 32 in that area.
So you had started work on that at that point in time?
I had not worked in that at all. I was
no, but I mean Oldsmobile had started.
Yes, they were well underway under that.
All right.
And Eddie was offered a job with Ford Motor.
Oh.
And he went to the Ford Motor and worked.
Okay.
So I was called to come back and take over his job. So that really broadened my knowledge out by getting in on the assembly plant. At that stage. That I knew the assembly plant quite well, and I knew the motor plants well, and the presses fairly well.
So at that juncture, Bill, we were in the engineering phase of getting ready for the new assembly plant.
Right.
Okay.
They had the old assembly plant, which was down through 16 A, B, and C.
Yeah.
That was where they started up after the war.
All right.
But that didn't last very long because they put the new plant in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I went in there and finished up on that job. And I might also mention that Ford was in a lot of trouble at that time, whether it's going to keep going or not even. And Dykster had gone to Ford.
Okay.
And he was taking some of the people that he knew out of Oldsmobile.
Okay.
And I was offered a job twice with him.
No, is
once
that
in
right?
Canton and once in Chicago.
Huh.
But I turned it down. I felt that well, a wife didn't like to move for one thing,
Sure.
and
Sure.
I liked to carry an Oldsmobile too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where did we come in here, Bob?
Okay.
After I'd finished that job,
Yeah.
I mean, winding down, John Dakin was having more of his time taken in plant operation than what he could handle.
Okay.
So he apparently talked Don Burnham into having an assistant. So at that time, I was called into John's office and told by Don Burnham that they'd created a new position, which was superintendent of maintenance construction, and that I was to be superintendent in charge of plant one, maintenance construction. So
that would be all of the shops, Bill, the tinners, yes, and the
all the
pipe shop and the millwrights and
everything,
all
the
that
thing,
stuff.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which again was a broadening experience for me.
Sure.
And shortly thereafter, or I would say a few years afterwards, John was killed, and at that point, Tom Downey called me to his office and informed me that I was plant engineer at Oldsmobile.
Okay. Did Dexter get killed in an automobile crash?
No, John Dakin.
Or Dakin, I mean, did he?
Yes.
An automobile crash?
Yeah, he was with a group of Lansing people going down to a weekend of prayer and Bible study and so forth. John was very dedicated Catholic and gave his spare time to the church.
I see. Okay. See,
well, when speaking about the promotion there, I would go back just a little and say that I enjoyed the work as on maintenance construction. I've always liked to work with my hands, and I also like to work with skilled trades.
How were what I'll call the union relations in those days, Bill?
Actually, I never had a great deal of a problem with the union.
Didn't you?
Okay. Most of the time, one of the committee men who would be the head of the skilled trades would come out of our department. Mm-hmm. So we'd have some background, and they knew plant engineering problems and had worked in plant engineering and so forth. So I think that our relationship was good, that I knew what their problem was, having worked in shop many years before I come to Oldsmobile even. And that we were able to meet on common ground and without ranking and tearing of hair and so forth.
You must have been there when we had the big steel strike. Well, was it? No, not the steel strike. It was a General Motors strike, wasn't it? Right after the war.
Yeah. We most of us, as I recall, went over to the basement of Howard Sober's.
Oh my goodness.
Garage. Fact is, while I was there, I was given the assignment of building another line of plating. You know, they had one line of plating in building 77. They had put a second line in the area of the building just south of that.
All right.
So I developed that to its fullest, ready to go to work. And then they decided not to do it.
Oh, okay. It never happened.
Never happened.
All right.
but it did give me a good understanding of plating, which I found very useful when I was made plant engineer of plant 3 that plating was there, and so it was not an unknown to me.
Can you think back to what some of the typical in dealing with the shops and the construction people, what some of the typical problems or events might have been that you would have had to gone through?
I was a very strong believer in every man had the capacity to keep up with times. I just couldn't stand to see a good man become we might say, a light bulb changer.
All right.
So I always had some training programs off the job for the skilled tradespeople, trying to keep them current and also instill in them that they were important people and they were tradesmen and they should be proud to be a tradesman. And I think that with the training and the pride in their job, that a lot was accomplished.
Okay.
Getting back to the job where I was maintenance construction, I was quite pleased with the development of the people, but the thing that I was very disappointed in was that we tried to come up with a preventive maintenance program.
Oh, okay.
And we were able to set up the computers and so forth for digesting the materials. But we just weren't seeing right. And the technique was not there at that time to put the triggering mechanism in for a good maintenance program. When I say the trigger mechanism, most of them tried and we tried to work it on a time basis.
Okay.
But time basis just did not work.
Yeah.
Because this machine was running and you can't take a machine out of production from a production superintendent.
Not very well.
So it wouldn't trigger him to let you have the machine to do work on it.
Yeah.
That's why I say that we and others that work on preventative maintenance did not realize that we did not have the proper triggering mechanism. Where I think that along with the rocket development and so forth, the state of the art should have come along that give machinery that or sensing equipment that could be depended upon, that the production superintendent, the man on the floor running the machine, and the maintenance man both agreed, well, this machine needed attention. And they both agreed to it. But other than that, it just didn't come together.
Yeah, the folks on the production floor were more interested in cranking out pieces.
Yes. And sometimes we would know, and they would know that it could be not meet standard.
Yeah.
But I think that all of us who worked in the shop knows how some of those things happen.
Yep. Okay.
I think that
hey, Bill, wait a
the
minute.
time
just a second. Have we built plant 3 yet?
No, I did not cover much of plant 3.
All right.
Because that was at the time when I was superintendent.
All right.
Of maintenance construction.
Okay, so you didn't have much to do with that at all.
No, I did come into it though at the end.
All right.
When John was killed. I think the wife will get that. When John was killed, I was then put in charge of it, and that come under me at that time.
John Dakin had that plant?
Yeah, he was over all of them except plant 2 at that time.
All right. The plant 3, you know what precipitated that building?
Well, they needed, after the war, they needed plating capacity. See, I'd worked on that additional line.
Yes.
They decided that was not the way to go. It was not a cure to the problem.
All right.
So they built the plant 3 for plating and for the crankshaft.
Okay, but now the jet engine business happened in there somewhere.
Right. That come in there. They had extra space, and there was a need for the. They were making blades.
Yeah, lots of turbine blades.
Yeah. So that just come about. Well, there was a second stage that was more the Korean War.
Yes. Yeah.
When the rocket or when the blades were made over there.
Now the plant we had bought for that potential foundry or the land,
Yeah.
and it just lay there kind of idle until we did that.
Until we built the plant.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
I think there's a few landmarks that come about that may still show that come about while I was plant engineer. And one was that we started to build buildings without windows.
Mm-hmm. Remember that.
And it was new, but we were able to control the atmosphere by bringing in air, heated air, and exhausting through machinery or whatever. And I don't know if they still are building without windows or not, but to me, it was the way they should be built, because in the spring it would be too warm and the men on the floor would throw stuff through the windows. The windows would be broken out. Or if they wouldn't open, they'd get broken out. So you were always repairing windows, always repairing the ventilated sections. So we decided among us that that wasn't the way to build a plant. Plant should be built with no windows. People didn't want to look out the window anyway. It was dirty.
Yeah, it's true. They were.
So I think that's one mark that might have left on Oldsmobile.
Did that require, when we did that, a significant change in what I call the ventilation philosophy?
Yes, it did. Because early days, you may exhaust a couple 100,000 cubic feet of air out of a building, but they were quite prone to not put in the replacement air.
So it just kind of came.
So the building was under a vacuum, and you've seen it where you get swatted in the butt when you open the door. And well, that's what would happen. So with this development, you had to supply air, you had to heat air. So you had control of it, and you could get your air as cool as you could to your dew points. So you actually could make the plant more comfortable for the people that way. So
we actually did some cooling?
Oh, well,
evaporative cooling,
yes, we evaporate cooling when it was a cooling system. And in wintertime, it would be heating through the same system. They were built to operate either way. And it did improve the conditions in those buildings. And it made a bit cheaper building too, because we were always, when we were building buildings, getting in trouble with the bricklayers. The bricklayer wouldn't be ready when the windows were ready, or one of the other. So you were always held up on a job, finishing the building for the windows or for the bricklayer, one or the other. So we just eliminated both of them, and put in insulated panels mostly, and the conductivity was much better on those. Insulation was better, and so was the acoustics.
Did in the earlier days, did we ventilate things like block lines and have dust collection and those kinds of things?
Yes,
we did that.
Okay. Now that was actually my field, or my engineering major was in thermodynamics, which had to do with heat, cool, and so forth. So it fell in quite easily with ventilation and so forth.
Bill, I'm going to back you up a little bit further. The old engine plant prior to the rocket engine, Was that a lot of single-purpose machinery?
Yes, there was a lot of single purpose.
Was it?
Right.
Was it any of the stuff with overhead shafting? Did it still have that, or had that gone away yet?
Oh, yeah, there was that too.
There was still overhead shafting in the plant.
Yeah.
Or with a big flat wide belt?
Oh, no, not where you use your belt transfer.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
No, it's all electric motor.
All right, so that had all gone away by the time you had gotten there.
Right.
All right.
But there's a lot of most of them were single purpose, operation, a drill press, a mill.
All right.
Or a broach.
And people just kind of push blocks or heads from one place to another.
Right, on a roller conveyor or something like that.
All right.
Right. Yeah.
So the V8, the rocket engine, was perhaps the first approach of getting automation and that kind of thing?
Right, it was. Of transferring from one machine to another.
Yeah.
Have an operator
sort
at
of
one end and the other at the other end.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Excuse the interruption.
Mm-hmm. There's another one that we come to a conclusion on that we would not put in any more transformers in the plant. This may seem insignificant, but that's where all your power goes through the transformer.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And they blow up and so forth, not very often. Anyway, we decided that we would go through, cooperation of the engineering, myself and others, we'd go entirely to dry transformers.
All right.
When doing that, we got rid of separating the oil, and also the greatest thing was that your PVC, there's no problem there.
Had the PCB business that apparently was known about at that juncture? That
it wasn't known to the extent of it.
Okay.
But through a little luck and some judgment on what we liked about the dries, we did not contribute to that problem. That we went dry and replaced with dry.
Now we had some transformers that were kind of buried in the middle of the plant here and there.
Those were owned by the city.
Were they?
Yeah.
I think weren't there a bunch of them down by the old powerhouse?
Yeah, they went from 13.2 into our power there.
Okay.
So they brought their power in underground with cable.
All right.
Into their transformers where they cut it down from 13.2 to 460.
All right.
Or 480, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And then we distributed from the 480.
All right. Bill, I'm going to interrupt you again to go back and talk about prior to building 37. Before we built their building 37, there was a big tall smokestack and a powerhouse and a bunch of other little buildings that which were kind of the old original buildings of the plant.
Right, the old wooden buildings.
Yeah. Do you remember what was going on in those buildings?
Yes, I can remember some of them because I think it was building 2C was one of the first ones down there.
Yeah. And
that was the plating plant.
The plating plant
was in there. Just a few DC generators.
Yeah.
Like that.
The guy would go from tank to tank by hand.
Right.
Was that the original plating plant?
Yeah,
sort
as
of?
far as I know, it was original. It was there when I come. It was under, we might say, in cold storage.
Yeah.
During the war.
Yeah.
Because we set up an oil refining operation in that building during the war.
You did? Okay.
And then there was the powerhouse that was in there with the stack and so forth that was taken out.
Now, we actually made steam ourselves?
No, we never made. They had some furnaces there that made a little steam, but it wasn't enough.
Okay. What did we use the powerhouse for?
At one time, it was their source of power.
It was. It was the source of power for the heating the plant?
Right. But it was before my time.
All right.
It was still used mostly as an incinerator.
Oh, all right.
When I come there.
All right. So all of the heating in the plant was at that time being provided by the board?
Right.
All right.
Yeah. And what we did there was the board sent us over high pressure steam. And then we sent that through the compressors.
All right.
Air compressors.
We had steam driven
air compressors. And that brought it down to a lower pressure where we made our distribution in the plant from the steam that had passed through the compressors.
All right. Now,
it was a so-called economic, but
yeah. Were those big piston compressors? How did they work? Do you remember what they were?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Just great
Most
big.
of them were Worthingtons or Worthingtons or Ingersoll Rand.
Big steam engines. They were really steam engine.
They were actually steam engines with running the air compressor.
Did they have flywheels? Big flywheels?
Flywheels on the ones we had there were probably 12 feet in diameter or something like that.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Now, some of the other buildings, let's see, there was a 10 and a.
Yeah, and that was the garage, as I recall, at the time they tore it down.
All right.
Yes, and also plant engineering machine repair was in there.
Was in that building.
Right.
Okay.
Machine repair and auto and truck repair.
Okay. Was there an 8? You remember an 8?
8 is familiar, but I can't. I don't recall it.
You mentioned, was it 2B? You had mentioned
2B and 2C. That
2B and 2C were the plate.
South end.
1D had been torn down apparently prior to that. Must be.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't. They would have gone.
Maybe that's all I can remember in that area. Now the chimney came down.
Yeah.
Were you there?
Yeah, I was there at the time.
Were you there the day it went down?
No, I wasn't. It was on a Sunday.
Trying to find somebody that's been there and saw it go down.
I didn't. No, never did.
Okay. Okay, well, excuse the interruption again there. You're doing fine here.
I think another thing that we established in plant engineering during that time was that all contracted or all bid jobs had to be analyzed by the engineer, and that he had to make a spreadsheet giving all of the bids and comparison, and then the decision would be made who was to be awarded the contract.
Why did you do that?
I did that because I didn't want to be called back and say, well, we'll say some company would say, well, I didn't get a fair break there. All right, that was permanently filed with that bid and that job and kept as long as we can remember anyway. So it was a way of keeping the honest.
Did you always, even in the earlier days, get bids on jobs, Bill?
Yeah, but they weren't so particular with them as what we were later.
All right.
Become a bigger operation, and verification was necessary, and also you had to satisfy the purchasing department too.
Yeah, you were a little bit more professional, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there occasions where we had to just get a guy in to go do something?
Well, when we go back to that storm we had,
the 67 thing?
67 storm.
Yeah.
Jarvis was called in, and they took all of the steel work, replacing it, fabricating it, and getting it in place, which they had the facilities for doing it, and purchasing management said, well, get it done and we'll settle on it afterwards. Sure, it was an emergency.
Yeah.
So in that particular case, yes, you could go out and get the job, but other than that, all the time I was plant engineer, everything was documented as far as bid is concerned.
Okay. All right.
I felt it's the only way you can do business.
Yeah.
But I had some terrific people working for me. You know a lot of them because you worked with us too.
Sure. Who were some of the folks that were there, Bill?
Well, if I would name a half a dozen, I'd be skipping 50 that were equally important.
Let's see.
But the people that were real close to me was
who were your immediate?
George Rollins.
All right.
Dave Lee, Walt Sparrow.
Okay.
They worked very close with me all the time. So, I mean, those were the closest ones. And Rudder when he was there, but Dave took over when Rudder retired.
Stu left. I can't remember when Stu left. All right. So you've got, let's see, another item here that may be item on relationships with the union.
I think we covered that, Jim.
We covered that enough?
When I talked about
earlier on?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let me see. Go back to the snowstorm business that you just mentioned a moment ago. Bill, that was building 32?
Yeah, didn't we mention that up to now?
I don't think so.
Oh.
Yeah. other than just our little discussion about it.
Yeah. Well, in January of 1967, we had a very severe snowstorm. I think it had started in about the middle of the week.
Yeah.
And piled up a lot of snow.
I remember we had 27 inches.
Something like that. Yeah. So I remember we looked out the back of our house and it was piled up right up to the eaves on the east side of the house. Well, anyway, as a result of that storm, we had a building collapse. Roof of the building collapsed in building 32.
That wasn't the whole building, was it?
No, well, the building was a roof and it all come in.
Yeah, but that was just one of the bays.
Well, there's about 4 bays that went down.
All right.
At one time. Well, I was called about 9 o'clock in the morning from plant protection that they had a roof collapse, so I went in immediately. And fortunately, I had just had the night before I'd had the road plowed out, so I and one of the fellows from sales could get out. He had to be in a meeting in California, and I had to get to work, so I arranged a snowplow to clean it out so we get out, fortunately. So I was able to get out and went in the plant, and I say it had taken 4 bays of the roof, and all of the wiring, control wiring for the assembly conveyors. And the part of the power was taken out too. Was there anybody in the plant when that collapsed? Not at the area where it collapsed. Thank goodness. And still, there was danger that more was coming down. Because all that weight was still there. All the heavy snow was still sitting there. So we got our carpenters and millwrights in there, and we began to shore up sections of buildings to keep any more from going down. Was that a relatively light-duty building? What had happened there was apparently building 75 was built at one time, 32 was built another. Yeah. All right, there was an area of a train dock. Where the old train track went up through. Right through there, yes. Yeah. And apparently they built a cantilevered type roof. Like a shed roof, sort of. Yeah, well, no. What I'm saying there is a cantilevered roof. You'd have the roof with its regular slope. Yeah. And rather the columns being out on the center or out on the edges and so forth. Oh, I see what you mean, yeah. They were partially inboard. They were supported inboard. Yeah. So it made a room for traffic on that, and also for the train to come in. Sure. Well, they closed that area in between the buildings. And what happened was that as the buildings began to heat up and the heat go up through the building, snow just slid down that roof. And when it slid down the roof, it went out the
Son of Marathon, Florida. The recording was made on January 16th, 1989 by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center. This is tape number 2 of 2 tapes. Okay, Bill, back to the roof business. The roof the snow had all slid down into that valley.
Yeah, the weight of the snow had caused the building to collapse. So I examined the extent of the damage and realized that we had to arrest the further damage, which our yard people come in and relieve some of the snow load.
Did you shovel it off? Is that what you actually had to end up doing?
Right. I shoveled it into areas where it wouldn't collapse the roof. Yeah. And it was melting too. Anyway, I had pretty well evaluated what the problems were and what we had to do. And most of the superintendents and so forth were in the plant by this time. And Rollis got a hold of me because I was answering direct to Rollis. And he asked, well, when could the plant be back in operation? And I thought a little bit, and I said, well, it can be ready Thursday on the afternoon shift.
Mm-hmm. So that was like a week from the time.
No, that'd be about 4 days.
4 days, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he said, well, then I will, I'll get a notice out on the radio and TV that people are not to come into work until Thursday on the afternoon shift.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, we met our date all right, because there was a lot of heroes there. In fact, as I was there all that first night, and it was kind of scary. You'd hear cracks, snap, and so forth.
Really?
The building is being strained so hard.
Yeah.
But we're getting it shored up, so we didn't lose any more. And immediately Jarvis was in and taking out steel and so forth and making new.
They had to make new trusses and
yeah,
those kinds of things.
And then our electrical department, they worked around the clock and restored all the power and controls and so forth. And we were running.
Didn't freeze anything up with all that cold air coming in there?
No.
Yeah. Did all of the guys that you needed, they were able to get into the plant because of the snow?
Some of them couldn't, but those that could, there's no hesitation, they come in.
You could get them in enough to do the task.
Yeah. As a sidelight to that, in fact, as I brought the clipping back to Bob Ross, we went, Mary Jane and I, the wife, went to Boston to see our son. It was the first year he was away from home. He had to mother him at his birthday.
Oh, yeah.
And so we went from Boston to Andover, where the son was working for Bradenton. And while we're there, the son said, well, I've got a clipping here they just took out of the paper a few days ago, named Rollis and myself.
Oh, neat.
Being coded about the building being ready and that people didn't have to worry. They would have cars, they'd meet their production schedules. So I thought that was kind of interesting to go that far. And
all the way in Boston, yeah. That is it. Oh, thank you, Noel. Appreciate it. Yeah.
I think we're about done.
Well, we're getting close. Bill, were the cars under the roof where it collapsed? Or was it?
Yes, there was cars there, sure.
So
sure
it actually ruined some vehicles.
Yeah, it damaged some vehicles, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How many, can you think back to when you first came into plant engineering, Bill? How many guys were there working versus how many were there when you left?
Well, in the engineering, I think there were about probably 6 engineers, something like that.
6 doing the whole plant?
Yeah.
Wow.
About 6.
And then when you retired, there must have been...
Well, we used to run, in rough figures, right around 100 salary people. That'd be your supervisors and engineering and so forth. Right.
Okay. So it did change quite significantly. And the plant grew significantly over that period of time.
Right. Yeah.
Seems like we were adding buildings at a rather rapid clip. Yeah, let's see, plant 4 came to pass while you were there, didn't it?
Yes, yeah, plant 4. And then also plant 2 come under plant 1, plant engineering.
Eventually.
During that period too. So.
Were there any, can you remember back to plant 4, were there any peculiar happenings when that thing came to pass? I think that must have been 1959.
Yeah, that was a press plant there. I think that was the first plant that we had built at Oldsmobile that allowed you to have removable floor.
Okay.
And you supported the presses off the building substructure.
Right. Did the plant 3 site have any peculiar things about it? I thought it had a lot of poor soil or muck or something in it.
Well, the muck was down there in the, it would be the front end.
Kind of towards Saginaw Street?
Yeah, it'd be the Saginaw Street,
Uh-huh.
and it'd be just about in line with the old part of Plant 3.
Oh, all right. Uh-huh.
Yeah. But it was just a swampy area there.
Was it?
Yeah.
When we bought Plant 3,
you mean the property?
Yeah, the property.
Well,
did it have a funny name? God, I swear I remember an odd name they applied to
I
that
think
place.
what you're thinking, I don't remember who owned it now, but there was, I believe, 40 acres.
There was a Larrabee farm.
Right, yeah. It was 40 acres, and that's where the press plant went.
All right.
So
that's that appendage that kind of stuck out to the west.
Right,
Uh-huh.
right.
All right.
Yeah.
And the main hunk of ground?
I think it's about 80 acres in one and 40 in the other.
All right. Yeah. See, there was a big sewer pipe through there of some kind too, I remember.
Yes, yeah, there was.
Huge drain.
Township, right.
Did that end up going right under the plant or something?
As I recall, it went between the railroad tracks and our fence line there.
All
I think it went right down through that area there.
We bought a lot of land at Plant 1 and tore down a lot of houses.
Right, and expanded the plant a lot there.
So you must have seen a lot of new parking lots and things like that happening.
Right.
Any peculiar occurrences that happened in doing all of that?
No. We built our parking lots according to state standards, and which was a little better than most people built lots.
Yeah.
But they stand up. I think that Plant 4 existence was brought about by some effort on my part.
Okay.
Well, we were having a great deal of trouble getting rid of our refuse from the plant.
All right.
We'd hauled it south of town for quite a while. It was getting filled up. So I talked to Downey about it.
This was Tom Downey?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he said, well, why don't you look around and see if there's any land available, and maybe we should buy it. So I did some investigation, and then I run into Jim Weed, who was part owner of Jarvis Engineering. And he was telling about a piece of property he had east of town. Or west of town.
Right.
West of town. Yeah. So I went out and looked at it, and I thought, well, that looks good. So I went back to Jim Weed, and I said, well, what kind of price are you thinking about getting for that? And he said, oh, $100 an acre.
No kidding. Wasn't that something?
And I said, well, I'll get in touch with Mr. Downey, and then he'll contact Argonaut and see if they want to buy it. They come up and bought it immediately.
I can imagine they would at that price.
Well, the thing of it was, several months later, Jim said, you know, you got that I got myself in trouble.
Oh.
And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, the real estate man jumped all over me for making a price of $100 an acre on Plant 4 land.
I can imagine.
So I wished I'd have bought it myself.
Yeah, you could have. So we bought that originally for a dump site, so to speak.
Landfill, yes.
Landfill. And then we actually did use it as a landfill?
To a degree, yeah.
And then we built a little incinerator or something out there.
Yeah.
Why did we do that?
That was to get rid of the confidential stuff and paper and so forth.
All right.
But the state of the art was not the best. I would say the incinerator was not a success.
Is that right? Was it just a big maintenance problem?
Yeah, it was a high maintenance problem. Yeah. We did burn the paper and so forth there, combustible stuff, and spread the ash there, but it took manpower to run it, which it shouldn't take. And it just didn't pan out to be what it should have been.
You know, we ultimately built the warehouse out there.
Yes, yeah. I was there when the warehouse was built.
And
I was plant engineer when that was built.
I wonder, why did the warehouse come to pass? Do you remember what caused that?
Well, building 62, which was a parts warehouse,
Yeah.
was was more demand on it, and they didn't have enough room.
Okay.
Oh, what was the name that followed that?
Ken Mix.
No, Ken Mix was.
Oh, okay.
There's two brothers. One was plant maintenance or plant general manager at one time. It'll probably come to
That's
me.
okay.
Yeah. So you can find out.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were in need of space, so it was decided that that would be the best location for a big area.
Mm-hmm.
And then the shops were located out in the old section of the plant, so they were able then to use that building for the medical and plant engineering personnel and such things as that.
And then we put in the F-85 line back in the old 16 area, as I remember, at that same time.
Yeah.
The new F-85 line.
Yeah. It wasn't a very long run.
No. Did the plant for the warehouse building, that was a humongous building, as I remember. Almost a half a mile long.
Yeah.
Did that present any peculiar problems that you remember?
I think we did a lot of innovative in that. Fact is, Argonaut made the statement that they'd never lived down the cost per square foot for that building. It was come under much more than what they had been doing. Mm-hmm. That was another building we built without windows. And then we put in light sections, because you had nothing that they had to support from it. And all block. It made a very economical building. Mm-hmm.
It was a big building, too. Yeah. It sure was. We had to drill. That was the first time I think I had ever seen them drill footing.
Yeah.
Well, had that been the first time we had done that kind of construction work?
Yes, we run test samples on the soil. Had a consulting firm come in. They always did that. And it was established that there was a good gravel base under there. Oh, I don't remember what the distance was.
40 or 50 feet anyway, quite a ways.
So it was ideal for going to that type of footing. And they're very economical, because all you do is drill down through there. And then when you get down to the depths and you've got the proper soil bearing, you bell it out. You have a drill that flares out and cuts wider base there. And then at that point, after they would drill it and bell it out some, then they'd send a man down there and he would run the whole sort of a Bernal test on the soil. You know what a Bernal test is?
Sure, oh yes.
With a balloon. A hard balloon. Yeah. They would get the hardness of the soil there, so then determine the soil bearing capacity.
And then you just fill that whole thing full of cement?
Just fill it full of concrete.
Previous to that time, we had built buildings with just the regular flat footings, the spread footings?
Most of the time, yeah. When we put in that new press plant, I remember the building at 49, wasn't it?
49, yes, was the big, tall, wide, huge crane building that we built.
Yeah, press plant.
Yeah, right.
That one we put in piling. We drove piling for that one, steel piling. Okay.
And that must have been, once again, because of bad soil conditions, sort of?
Well, it was an economical way, and you could get down and get good, well, fact is you could drive till, those were driven to complete resistance. So in other words, until they hit rock.
Couldn't do anything more. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I remember that. That building had, I think at the time, 150-foot crane bay in it, or something like that.
Just one
huge wide crane.
Yeah, right. That's why they wanted it.
That must have been the biggest crane that ever existed on Oldsmobile's property.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
See, Tom Downey, we didn't talk about him much, Bill. What can you tell me about Tom Downey?
Well, if you'd asked that question to Bob Russell, he knew him from coming from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Bob come with that group from Wisconsin. Tom was a real bull of the woods type of individual. A good individual. I liked Tom, and we got along real well.
Mm-hmm. How was he different from Bob Rollins?
Well, Bob was sort of his. Bob was his assistant.
Mm-hmm.
I did not tell some things.
Don't let me ask a question you don't want to talk about. I may wander off in directions that's not right.
Well,
no, that's okay.
It's dead.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes, I know. Okay, let's see what.
You were asking about Tom. I told you some things there, and he was a real rough individual, but a real kind individual. That under that bluff was a lot of good Irish humor and fun.
Yeah. What do you think, Bill, during all that time was maybe the most significant happening that happened? You told me about a lot of the neat innovations which came to pass under your direction. And what do you think out of all those years was perhaps maybe the most significant thing that happened at the plant?
I don't know of any one thing.
You could pick out a thing.
No.
Okay. What was maybe the most interesting job you had? Try that.
I found all of my jobs interesting.
Did you? Okay.
And I was moved around enough that I had a good knowledge of all of Oldsmobile's operations. Mm-hmm. I wished I hadn't had to retire as early as I did. I retired 5 years early, but.
See, when did you retire? We didn't get that down.
I think it was 73, wasn't it?
May 1st, maybe 73?
Yeah, May 1st, 73.
All right.
Which gave me 32 years exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'd like to stay those last 5 years, but now you call it burnout. I think that's probably what happened to me. Burnout and health was giving me some problems.
Sure.
I thought the writing was on the wall. And
had the way we've managed changed much in that 30 years that you saw? How we managed the plant?
Oh yes, yeah.
What can you recall about that sort of thing?
That it was probably as the early part, there was more call somebody up and tell them to do it, or by verbal, where later it become communication through the network of the plant or the operations.
Kind of had to use more paper and more less verbal sort of thing.
Yeah.
The operating committee you had mentioned, that was there when you sort of came,
right?
And it was still there when you left,
right?
All right. Mm-hmm. So that was a way of bringing all functions together, so to speak, in the plant.
Yeah, at the time together, and it also let you know what the schedules was going to be, and if there was anything in particular that you should be aware that was going to happen, that you should make preparation for, you could do it.
All right.
I always held a meeting directly after lunch on the days they had operation.
Okay. The operating meeting was in the morning, kind of?
Yes, 9 o'clock. And then I'd communicate to the department heads within our department.
All right.
So they were knowledgeable of what took place, and they weren't getting a second-handed, that they were getting as quick as I could give it to them.
Right. Well, Bill, that's great. I mean, that's excellent. Did a good job, I think. So that was excellent.
I wish you'd have your wife come up here.
Oh no, I think that's fine. I'll shut this off here. Find the right button.